So this afternoon, we welcome Conference Minister David Popham, who will be sharing his experiences during his first year as Conference Minister. So without further ado, let's welcome Conference Minister David Popham.
Thank you, Lori, and good afternoon, all. It's good to be here and kind of have this time to talk story and connect with one another. If you have made it this far, congratulations. We're almost there. We're heading into the home stretch, so to speak, of our Aha Pae this year. We have seen, if you've been with us the whole week, you have participated in workshops. If you've also been able to tune into the work of our partners in ministry throughout the week, the State Council of Hawaiian Congregational Churches, the Christian Endeavor, the Sunday School Association, as well as the AHEC meetings. You know that there's a lot of good ministry that is going on and a lot of faithful people committed to those ministries. So I begin these remarks. I do so knowledgeable that the good work of the conference office is accomplished due to the faithful and untiring work of the office staff. Our office hours are formally 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. I arrive and they are here. I go home and they remain here. To be frank, I'm not sure when they spend time with their family. Intelligent, thinking, and committed to the well-being of the conference, this office staff is simply amazing. And I have much appreciation for Richard Kamanu, Vivian Manakea, Lori Yamashiro, Julie Buto, Chris Nuuhiva, Corrine Morishige, Ann Osavo, Christian Young, and our volunteers that have stepped forward. There they are. Step forward, Dorothy Lester and Doug Wooten on the conference staff. The same superlatives go to other members of the conference office, Laureen Arata and Andrew Bunn with the foundation, and Clara Priester with the Women's Board of Mission. There is much that can be said about this incredible group, and I am profoundly thankful to consider myself a colleague among them. I also want to give thanks to the conference ministers out in the churches, particularly in this time of COVID-19. This has not been an easy time to be a minister. There are a lot of pressures on our local churches to shut down and pressures around reopening. And so the ministers are kind of become my new heroes, people who hang in there with a faithful sense of God's mission and a faithful commitment to living out that mission in local settings. So thank you, ministers, for what you do. I do have a report on file. And so some of my comments here, parallel comments in that report, but I kind of wanted to go beyond that as well. But feel free, if you have a question on the written report, feel free to ask it here if I don't get to that or explain something that may have you scratching your head, as well as questions that are raised from our time together. To put it succinctly, and you all know this as well as I do, we are a people on a journey to unity. The path stretches before us with some of it clear and foreseeable and some of it really hidden and unknown to us yet. Nevertheless, the Spirit has called, and we have answered that call to leave the land of discord and conflict for the land of harmony and unity. This journey does not mean we ignore or travel around the issues causing disruptions in our fellowship. Such paths really leave us stranded in the land we have been called out of by God. Rather, the path forward runs straight into the controversies so that we may deal with them with integrity and character. Unity does not mean that there is never disagreement or hot debates. That is uniformity. Rather, unity is achieved, and I know I'm switching metaphors here, so come over the bridge with me. Unity is achieved like a good cake is achieved. It is the harmony and balance of ingredients that are individual and yet when put together are supportive of the whole in the one vision of becoming a cake. The Hawaii Conference United Church of Christ community can only reach our desired harmony and balance when we sit down and work through the disharmony and imbalances that are both a part of our legacy and therefore a part and maybe even a threat to our future together. So toward this end, I will be advising the new council, which you all will be voting on tomorrow. I will be advising the new council to set aside time in the council meetings to pick up the difficult conversations and make them central to our work as leaders of the conference. I know this will impact the logistics of how we carry on our meetings. Right now, on the same day conference council meets, after it gets done meeting, the members of both the conference council and the foundation's board of trustees meet, and then after that, the foundation board of trustees meets. We won't be able to continue all that in one day, and that may not be a bad thing. We'll find out. The good news is that with us having been locked down due to COVID-19, forcing us online, we know that we can be much more flexible in our gathering when we can gather online versus trying to gather face to face. And that should help us manage some of these meeting anxieties that we have. Harmony and balance also speak to the current budget conversations that are going on. Later today, I'm not looking to get into a budget per se because I know later today at 5 o'clock will be the workshop on the budget. But I do know that this is the one issue, or at least financial issues, is the one place that is addressed by Andy Bunn, Caroline Belsom, president of the Conference Council, and myself in our written reports, which tells you the weight of what's going on. So I want to step back and just give you a sense of the journey I've been on around this, and then of some of the future that I'm hoping to propose around this as well. So the journey is that I entered a conference in which by all measures, as the vote was being taken place at last year's Aha Pae āina, was a financially stable conference. And I do want to underscore that because that was the perception. However, once we got into looking at things like draws from the endowment that were way above the 4.5 to 5% safe draws, up above that, when we got to looking at unrestricted funds, we begin to realize that there had been some spending that had not been tracked as closely as maybe we would have wished it to be tracked. And these funds that had been available in the past were not so plentiful and available to us now. Particularly unrestricted fund number one was a fund from which a lot of money was withdrawn. It was also the fund that for money, when monies were asked for beyond the budget, it would be drawn from fund number one. That fund was spent to zero probably by April of 2019, so about a year and a half ago, that fund ceased to exist for us. I know it's difficult to live without that fund. We were looking at a budget deficit projecting a smaller amount of OCWM coming in this year of $400,000 to $500,000. And so we begin to ask that question, how do we pull together a budget within the funds that are available? At the same time, we're seeking to maneuver or draw from about 8.5% or so to a draw this year of around, I think we were shooting for 6.5. COVID probably won't allow that quite to be our target, as well as living without fund number one. And so we took the the way of looking at the budget kind of oversimplistically, to be honest, right? There's payroll that you, so staffing in the budget, and then there's program in the budget. It's oversimplistic because staff does programs, so it's not quite that way of cutting the budget, but it is how the budget itself is written up. So we looked at cutting expenses on both sides of that, expenses and the staff. We did that by eliminating the position that Dorothy had as a part-time associate conference minister when she retired. And we did that by invoking 5 non-paid furlough days for the conference staff. Between those two cuts, that was about $80,000 in realized savings for the budget for this year. The administration missional team had the duty of wrestling with programs and things of that nature to finally the budget that you will be talking about this evening was produced. And you'll see that there is a modest deficit amount still to the budget that we simply could not overcome this year. But we'll save that conversation for our budget this evening. So Lynn, our treasurer, if you're listening, I'm putting you on the spot. I know, you can thank me later. So anyway, that's a part of it. The other side of that is that, as I said, fund number 1 was the fund that we would go to for beyond budget ask and expenses. And so that kind of people I know have not been happy with me because I've been saying no a lot this year. Just between September of 2019 when I arrived in June of 2020, $100,000 had been asked for that would normally come out of that fund. And we had to say no to that simply because that fund doesn't exist, nor the money's represented in that fund. On the other side of life, also before I arrived, and in a very good way, to be honest, strategically thinking as well as thinking of the moral responsibility of financial stewardship, the conference had made some promises toward funding of future endowments and future needs of the conference. And so at one point I was sitting down realizing that we couldn't make those strategic promises given our present financial status. Those promises included creating a $4 million fund for generations of service, supporting the Certificate of Theological Education Leadership and partnership with the Pacific School of Religion, supporting new visions of ministry as in Kalapapa and a couple of other places, supporting the position of the Papa Makua, land maintenance on the properties the foundation is charged to take care of. When Andy Bunn, executive director of the foundation, and I sat down and added up these promises, right? These good strategic promises that had been made, they totaled just a little less than $20 million that needs to be raised. And so I am going to be proposing to the next council a $20 million capital campaign. 19.5 million of that will be just to live into the promises that have been made already upon our finances. 500,000 of it will be set aside for research and development in emerging church models. So please be aware of that I hope will come to pass within the next year or two, again, depending on where the economy is due to COVID-19 pressures. Speaking of COVID-19, clearly that's been the big wrinkle in everybody's plan this year, or depending on how you look at it, it could be the big opportunity to talk about, as our ministers have, how to be church in new ways, what it is that causes us to be church, and things of that nature, these wonderful kind of rich conversations around what it means to be a community of faith in these days and times. I do want to draw attention to the conference office recommendations for reconvening in-person worship. How about that for a title of a document? You can find this up on our health and safety page on the website if you want to go and look at it in full details. But I want to draw attention here because when this was written, we wrote it in such a way that we knew each island was contextualized differently from its neighbors' islands. And so we wanted churches to have the freedom to kind of be able to set what their context allowed. More so even now as the state government and the county governments wrestled with the same type of thing with what's happening on Oahu, but it's not happening on Kauai and things of that nature. So I do just kind of want to remind people of what the core of that recommendation is, because sometimes we get to the rest of reopening and we forget the core of things. The recommendation says, set your ethical compass and let your ethical compass answer the question about when to reconvene in-person worship. Because once that is set, then you really have your guideline. And the question is no longer, when can we reconvene, right? That's an institutional ego question. The question really is, when can we honor those who are in our midst the best? And we even suggested that the ethical compass be respect for the well-being of others. Individual congregations may state that as they choose for their ethical compass. We suggested a phased reopening of facilities so that not everyone is returning to the church campus at once. And I still personally think that our congregations need to manage health risk for a small group before jumping in and handling health risk for the entire group. We want to build up practice. It's like practicing for a marathon, right? You're not going to, if you're like me and you're a couch potato, you're not going to get out and run 26 miles today. You might run a half a mile. And then next week, you're going to add on another half mile and so on. So that's that idea. We suggest that in-person worship should always be conducted with guidelines set by your county ordinance. So not every church will open at the same time nor conduct worship in a similar manner. And the question again is not what is your neighbor church doing? The question is what is best for your church to do, given its context and the context of its memberships and those that you minister to. We also reminded folks that a service of word only brings the same fullness of the experience of Jesus as does a service of word and sacrament. So communion, while being a much appreciated and desired rite of the church, does not add to a service in which the word is already present. It can aid, but it doesn't add. So we ask that you keep that in mind as well. And of course, we have recommended, we still recommend that in-person worship forgo singing at this foreseeable time. There simply has been no way to make singing safe unless it really is somebody in a box unto themselves. I bring this up because COVID's not going away. We know that by now. Our hopes, of course, lie with the vaccine. Our hopes and prayers lie with the vaccine. But how widespread the vaccine will be, how effective it will be in a large population versus a small population, all of that is yet to be seen, which means COVID's going to be with us for the foreseeable future. And so we live with these recommendations still in place around how to conduct ourselves and for what purpose we are conducting ourselves, which is what? The praise and glory of God. And finally, and I'm returning to the journey metaphor here, I want to introduce some vocabulary for us to begin using as we face the obstacles that lie across the path of our journey. So if you think of a strategic plan as we have, as a journey, then we're on this path and obstacles will come and be across the path. And I think it would be important for us to have a shared vocabulary as we seek to describe these obstacles and resolve these obstacles. So that's what I'm going into next. And I appreciate your forbearance in getting kind of a little lecture that you didn't buy into today. Oversimplifying yet again, which is what I have a knack to do. An obstacle may be complex or it may be simple. And so some often lie in between, but complex or simple obstacles. A simple obstacle means that the resource to resolve that obstacle and the will and ability to resolve that obstacle are at hand and we can use them. So you understand that simple obstacle means the resources and then our will and ability to use those resources are here and we can use them. That means complexity doesn't have to do with the size of the obstacle, doesn't have to do with layers of history in an obstacle. It means that a complex obstacle is one in which the resources to resolve it and the will and the ability to resolve it are not within our reach. So that's the difference between simple and complex. Here is, again, an oversimplified example. So we're making our journey from the land of discord to the land of unity, and there's a tree that's fallen across our path. Well, a tree can be a very simple obstacle, right? Just get it cleared out of the path. But it may become complex if we don't have access or chainsaws or heavy lifting equipment that can move it out of our path for us. So again, the difference between simple and complex is around the resources and their availability for us to address the issues. So obstacles can be complex in three ways, and these are the kind of the three key words I want us to begin using. First is an obstacle can be dynamically complex. And when that happens, it is because the cause of an issue and the effect of that issue are far apart in time. There is the illegal overthrow of the Queen in 1893, and the effects of that overthrow are still wrestled with in 2020. This is a dynamically complex issue because 1893 and 2020 are far apart in history. Resolutions of dynamically complex issues can only occur through a systems approach. We just can't change a little something here or tweak something over there. We have to change the system. And that is because of the interrelationship among the entities of the conference and the functioning of the conference as a whole. That's that systems approach. I call this type of resolution the culture change because we have to change our culture in order to have the will and ability to change the system. So please be aware of that. And you will, if you have read my written comments, my written report, you will see that I spend half of that time talking about the culture of the Hawaii Conference, and that is why. So the second type of complexity is an issue can be generatively complex when the cause and effect of the issue are something new and unfamiliar for us. And so it unfolds in unpredictable ways, in ways that we might have worked with something similar in the past simply doesn't hold now. COVID-19 is a wonderful example of that. It's like the flu, but it's not the flu. And so how we handle the flu and how we handle COVID are not exactly the same. We are, as I like to say, we are building the plane as we fly it to figure out how we're handling COVID its effect upon worshiping in place or online, its effect upon funerals and hospital visits and all the things that go into being church, feeding programs, and all of those type of things. So as I said, the resolution to generatively complex issues cannot be calculated in advance based on what has worked in the past. We are facing something new, something unfamiliar, something unpredictable, and therefore resolutions to the issues have to be worked out and even changed as the situation unfolds, right? At the beginning, we were told you don't need to wear a mask. Now we are told mask it up for safety because we are learning more as the situation unfolds. As I said, I call this resolution build the plane as we fly it. I hate doing that. I'd rather have all my ducks in the row, but having ducks in a row doesn't resolve this type of problem. It puts us on that roller coaster ride of feeling like we're flying high and then dropping precipitously low as we do not do what we thought we were doing or on the projection we thought we were on. And so I remember Mae West and her quip, buckle up, it's going to be a bumpy ride. That also helps us understand what happens in generatively complex issues. And then the third type of complex issue is called socially complex. And an issue is socially complex when an peaceful resolution is appealed to by involving an outside source, but the outside source cannot force that resolution. If two kids are bickering on a play field at school and they appeal to the teacher, but the teacher cannot force the answer upon them. And these issues do exist within our conference as well, particularly between entities within our conference that have either grown jealous of each other or tired of each other. There's a number of ways I could describe this type of relationship, but it is socially complex because to resolve this issue, you can't appeal to the conference office. We can't even appeal to God. We do, though, appeal to each other to sit down at the table. This is what I call the come to Jesus meeting type of resolution, where we sit down, talk through those difficult conversations of what divides us until we get to the satisfactory outcome that can be attained by all involved. So again, I think it's important in our journey to understand the obstacles as they may appear before us. Some will be simple, some will be complex. Of those that will be complex, they can be dynamically complex, separated in time. They can be generatively complex, something that's unfolding and we're having to work with it as it unfolds, or they can be socially complex, where I need to sit down and have a tough conversation and hear each other out. And with them, then we can figure out what solution, can help us get us there. Is it a change in culture? Is it a building the plane as we fly it? Or is it come to Jesus and laying everything before the feet of Jesus as we meet as brothers and sisters in Christ? So that's kind of what I have to say for today. I thank you and appreciate you hanging in there for this last bit. So lastly, let me please hear me say in the midst of all of this, there is nothing we cannot deal with, be it budget or COVID or obstacles, as long as we live the covenant promise of Ephesians, that scripture we have been under all week, to walk worthy of the calling we have received. So I appreciate your time, and I'm going to wink at staff and say we're open for questions and answers if there are any.
Okay, first question, David. Will there be budget savings in planning for a virtual leaders event and a virtual AHA for next year?
Anytime we don't have to meet face-to-face saves us money, correct? because the conference underwrites plane fares and they hotel stays, things of that nature. I say that is part of the promise of being conference, right? We are there to help each other get together. So that will add some savings in this AHA. We have the particular issue of this budget for fiscal year 2020-2021 of hosting 2 AHAs. And the savings we have experienced in this AHA is helping us. And so we would expect that to continue if we do host virtual gatherings for the church leaders event in the Aha Pae āina 2021.
David, there is a comment posted on YouTube which states, the Mae West quote was actually Betty Davis in All About Eve.
All right, Betty Davis it is. I enjoy her acting as well, so thank you.
Another question online from Haunani asking, did the conference get any PPP help?
Yes, it did. I don't know if Corrine, our controller, is with us or can access being a panelist in the webinar platform. She can speak to that more than I can. It is one of the things that is giving us a rosier picture for our budget this year. Is one of the reasons why our budget deficit, projected deficit, is as small as it is.
Jack Belson wants to know, what surprising benefits have we discovered during this time of virtual meetings?
Surprising benefits. Flexibility. And also, I think, and we've seen it this week during the AHA offerings, more people can gather, right? Because you don't have to get on a plane and fly somewhere. You have the liberty to meet from home or to take an hour out of work if you happen to still be at work to participate in these things. So that's a beautiful piece. It's one thing that I've already suggesting, at least here to conference staff, that maybe next year, even if we do host an Aha Pae āina in person, that our workshops remain online or something of that nature so that more people can participate in them. And we find out we truly are the conference together, and that sense of isolation can begin to melt away.
Next question. Can you summarize your paper for those of us who have not read it?
Oh my goodness, you're asking me to be succinct. That's why I'm laughing and always get busted for not being succinct. So here I'm going to go. You can find this, it's in the Aha Pae āina handbook, which is up online on the Aha Pae āina page. And I forget where it is in that handbook, so I apologize for that. So if you want to go and look at it later, feel free to do so. Yes, it says my observations fall into 2 parts. One is about culture and one is about a program. Under culture, there are several observations. So the first one is we like to talk about each other. We have a problem talking to each other. The second observation is transparency is a two-edged sword. As the conference seeks to be transparent, we need to expect then that we're going to hear things that are going to make us uncomfortable, such as the budget issues and things of that nature. That the strategic plan still awaits ownership, that trust needs to be built, in that we are not lost nor without hope. Those are the observations under culture. Under ministry and programs, observations are ministers are my heroes. A piece on new expressions of being church, particularly lifting up Kalapapa, what's happening down there, and its switch from a traditional church based on worship as its purpose for existing to a church moving into a retreat center with worship still taking place, but that would be secondary to the retreat ministry. Then observations on budget awareness. observations on the Micronesian partnership, and observations on the possible capital campaign. Fills that out. If you want me to go into deeper, I can, but otherwise you can pick that up on the conference website.
So that is in the handbook on page R1 that your report starts, if someone is looking for it.
Thank you, Dorothy. I appreciate that, because the one I got in front of me is a printed out version before it went into the handbook. So I couldn't even tell you the page to find it on. So thank you.
Okay, we have a response back from our controller. This is regarding the PPP question that was asked a little while ago. The answer is yes, and the amount is $1,037. Excuse me, $137,900.
Thank you, Corrine, for being handy with that piece. I appreciate it.
And we have a comment from Lynn saying that we appreciate the conference efforts in keeping the churches informed and in conversation by hosting the Wednesday Zoom meetings, especially during the time of COVID. It's been a great job in keeping people together.
Thank you, Lynn. Again, here's one of the surprises, right? Where we can connect. If we had ever done a Zoom meeting conference-wide if it wasn't for COVID? Probably not. I don't know if we would have been smart enough to even try that. But here we are, and those were very good, well attended, and I know I appreciated connecting with ministers that way. I do want to put a plug in. Our next one will be next Wednesday, so at 10, and again at 2. And on that one, our controller, Kareem, will talk about the pandemic relief loan. That is a partnership between the Hawaii Conference, the Building and Loan Funds, UCC Building and Loan Funds, and UCC Cornerstone Fund, about how to access that, the paperwork and things of that nature. So please be aware of that if your church is in need of that low interest rate loan.
There's a question about, did individual churches also?
It is my understanding that yes, they did. How many and to what amount, we have not tracked that. But my suspicion is that a number of churches across all of our islands applied, and a number of them did receive that. I'd take that back. I don't know if that's PPP or small business loan, but did apply. We encourage them to do that.
First, a comment from YouTube saying that, yes, David's weekly Zooms have been such a great outreach to our pastors. And now a question from Jean. We may understand the strategic plan in different ways. Can you help clarify when speaking about the strategic plan to state more clearly just what in the strategic plan is being stressed?
When you say being stressed, I'm not sure how you're using that word. What is being emphasized or what is stressful? I'm sorry to have to ask that, but if you could clarify the use of the word, that will determine how I answer.
Emphasize.
Okay, the clarification has been, yes.
Okay, at the moment, the emphasis from the strategic plan tends to come only from two entities within the conference. One is the Coconut Wireless, where we try to, all the information that in there is linked to one of the strategic initiatives within the strategic plan. The other place that stresses it is the formation missional team. Outside of those two entities, there is very little talk about the strategic plan. And that's why I say it doesn't have ownership, because everybody is assuming somebody else is owning it. And therefore, nobody's owning it, correct? And so that's one of the pieces that we have to deal with. Some of that lies within the council. There's been some of the council missional teams were not functioning up to speed as we would have hoped. And these strategic initiatives within the plan, right, were parceled out to the teams. And so if the team's not up to working at full speed, then that part of the plan is not working up to full speed. I would say what I've seen emphasized most this year has been clergy education through the Theological Education Leadership Certificate with PSR and getting that kicked off, PSR Specific School of Religion. The plans for Kalapapa as we look at enlarged and different ways of envisioning being church and doing church. Those two are probably the ones that received the most attention this year.
Question
This is from Nylene.
Your observations are incisive. Addressing them will require not only strategy, but a systemic set of activities that have a common aim while effectively managing the diversity inherent in our conference. What are some of your thoughts about how you would like to approach this work? And what are your thoughts about mobilizing pastors and lay leaders to work with you to make this so?
Thank you. Somebody capture that. I love the first half of that, and I'll be quoting it at length. The second half, my answer here, we'll find out if it's worth anything. Right now, my goal is to begin work with the conference council to use a particular way of approaching particularly dynamically and socially complex issues, and so that we begin to sit down and talk through these things. And it's a piece that uses scenarios, to be honest, creating scenarios and thinking through scenarios. I'm starting with the council, right? Because the council is on all of the islands. I'm just on Oahu. And then from there to broaden that out, I don't know if we could hit it by Aha Pae āina 2021, but I would be thrilled if, for example, we brought the delegates together, if COVID and vaccines allow us to do that. We brought the delegates only together for the Aha. We maintained workshops online. But during the Aha, instead of doing workshops, we sat down with each other with these difficult questions in front of us of the work of the council that has taken place, and begin talking through and together. From there, going to the various islands or various associations, depending on how the council might wish to move that conversation out. But the goal, you have to start the conversation somewhere, right? And then you got to move it out from there. That takes time. Difficult conversations take time. The model, though, that I am proposing has been used. It was used in South Africa during the transition from apartheid to post-apartheid. It was used as part of the model for the peace accord in between Northern Ireland and Ireland. It's been used in some other places, both to great success and to some not so great success. So we understand what was missing in those places where it wasn't successful. So that's what I'm looking at now. That's what I've outlined to our potential new council president as to what I would like to do next year. I need to put in a plug for the council that is getting ready to rotate out. I need to say they've done a wonderful job. It's hard being a council. It's hard being a council president and officers of an association during the time of transition. And I appreciate and thank God for all that they've done. My own, and I state this in my written remarks, my own way of doing things is to come in and do observances first. So I'm getting to know an entity, an organization from the inside, so that what I'm suggesting is organic to an organization versus coming in with a pre-planned program. So that's why you hear me saying the next council, because that's who I always figured I'd be working with in terms of the observations I had made and reaching toward resolutions of things or strengthening things, whatever the case may be.
Another question from Jean. Among the intellectual community, one of the ways to talk about institutional racism in Hawaii has been talking about things like Asian settler colonialism. Do you understand the Native Hawaiians as being the host people in Hawaii?
The simple answer is yes, but I want to be careful of how we use the word host. Because in Hawaiian history, correct, there's that beautiful aloha welcome of all that have found their way to these islands. At the same time, there has been a colonial manipulation and taking advantage of that welcome. So, and I want to acknowledge that. And I want to acknowledge that the Hawaiian being the host culture was not the issue, right? The colonial settlers, and particularly white European and Northern American settlers, were the issues there. And that legacy remains with us across all of those that have been welcomed here, whether from Asia or from more recently from the Micronesian islands and other Pacific Islanders as well. And there's that whole legacy of racism, which is the white male, particularly the white heterosexual male, represents good, and anything that is not white heterosexual male represents deviance from that and is therefore not good. And there's a lot of work both within the Hawaii Conference and within the U.S. culture as a whole to address that legacy. I don't know if that answered your question, but I hope it did.
Question from Naleen. With regard to your process-oriented approach toward action steps, from your observations of Hawaii ethnocultural environment, what are your thoughts about how we go from process to synthesis, comprehension, and decision-making?
It's got to be all voices are at the table, and our voices are heard and honored at the table. That's a key part of that. It doesn't mean that every one of the objectives need that type of attention, but that overall goal of unity, without that, we're not going to get there. It means hearing things that are difficult for us to hear because it reflects upon ourselves. It means crying some tears. It means offering sincere apologies that go beyond, well, I've said an apology, so now we're okay, right? No, we're not. We still have work to do. It's that type of kind of dug in piece in my model that I raised up earlier. That's really the come to Jesus model, where we're sitting there very vulnerable to one another, and yet upholding one another. There are layers here, so some of the layers will be worked through probably a little quicker and than other layers. But at the same time, and hear me say this, right, problems never go away. I mean, that's a model, right? We dealt with this, now we don't have to deal with it, it's gone. But problems tend to be more like if you're a chemist and you think of chemical particulates that come out of solutions, right? They're always there. We always have to deal with them. So it's that kind of circular piece that I think we have to acknowledge as well, that we're going to deal with a problem and work our way through some of it, but not all of it. And we're going to have to come back around and continue dealing with that as well. And that will take, unfortunately, right, it took us 200 years to get to this point, and it's going to not be resolved in 1 year or 2 years. It's going to take commitment to that long-term journey to get us to where we, at least as bespoken in the strategic plan, where we want to be.
The question from Linda about strategic planning. How or what will make sure the strategic planning is done correctly for the upcoming year?
We're going to rely heavily upon the chair people of our missional teams. My apologies. I was about to use language from a former conference setting, so I apologize for that. To help outline those things, I will probably also begin putting this in office staff job descriptions that you are to trace this a particular strategic initiative in the plan and be in contact with these people on a regular basis. We've not done that this past year, and so that would be one of the things I'll see, and we'll see if that helps us, and if it doesn't, then this will be generative, right? So we'll find a new way to kind of deal with that. But that's what's on my at least short-sighted vision at this time.
There's some affirmations on the Zoom feed about thanks from Jean from using this way of dialoguing, and from Lori saying that. Thank you. And it's almost like having a one-on-one, she says. And Nalene says thank you as well for your thoughtful responses, and says if she can bring any of her experiences to help, she will do so.
Oh, I thank you for that. And trust me, we'll be in touch. So thank you for that. I also want to say I exist to serve you. And so if you want a one-on-one, feel free to call, feel free to email. I'm here to be in dialogue. And part of that is I get to hear your wisdom. And I appreciate that, right? Because I'm still the newbie and I'm still learning. And I love the depth of the wisdom that is in the Hawaiian Conference from all involved. Every time I have these, particularly one-on-one conversations, I always come away knowing something new and feeling a little stronger in my sense of what the Hawaii Conference is about.
Okay, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, David, for sharing and being open. And boy, you sure have a good-looking staff.